Hello, and welcome to the Concept Artist Podcast, interviewing up-and-coming concept artists to learn what it's like entering the industry today. Dominik Gümbel is a freelance concept artist who has worked primarily as a graphic and exhibition designer with focus on animation and illustration. He's consistently dipped his toes into concept art through networking and worked on his first AAA gig around December last year. Welcome to the show, Dom.
Hey there, happy to be here and I'm excited to talk with you.
I'm super excited to talk with you too. You've really had quite the adventure with your career.
Oh, yeah, that's true. It was kind of like a rocky path and it took quite some turns, but in the end it kind of worked out. So I'm happy about that.
My first question that I like to ask people is what they see as the main difference between what they would consider a concept artist and a more traditional illustrator or, say, a matte painter. You've done a bit of both. So what would you say is the main difference that you've noticed working in those fields?
I guess this is kind of complicated because this is really depending on the clients you work for and the company. So for example, a concept artist can be a lot because this is more like broader term, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as concept artists, you can either work mainly on character designs, prop design, landscapes, and you're trying to develop visuals from just text ideas so that the client can choose from and get some final idea, which kind of also is the pre-work from time to time transitioning into illustration, because it can happen that an illustrator is also doing concept art, but mainly a concept art is giving some visuals already or some ideas and has a story he tries to kind of put into a visual representation instead of just going in with rough designs and ideas. So it's more like a polished thing as an illustrator. And so I would say a concept artist is more like developing ideas, while an illustrator is given an idea already and tries to make it look beautiful and puts the story out there.
Really puts the final polish on things instead of allowing themselves to be a bit more, I guess, rough with things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's also, again, the depending on the client you work for. I've seen illustrators, for example, working as a so-called key artist. They also kind of work more illustrative and have action scenes, for example. But it's not that they have a final rendering. It's more they try to make variations with how could a story develop in a long term, in an animation, for example. Mm-hmm. And I think the easiest way to explain what the difference is, for example, if you know the game League of Legends.
Yes.
You have those loading screens, right, with all those heroes you can play.
And yeah, the splash art.
The splash arts, right. And an illustrator would basically just do the splash art, right? He also already has this character. That character already exists. A concept artist, on the other side, tries to develop such characters before they can be put into the game or movie or animation. So concept artist is sometimes way before an illustrator even starts to work. So I guess this is the easiest explanation for people to find a difference between that.
That completely makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's also difference again between gaming industry and graphic design industry, because it's also the area I came from, an illustrator in the graphic design or advertisement area is kind of more focusing on different styles. It's not so realistically drawn like League of Legends splash arts, but it's more trying to convey the idea even stronger than instead of focusing most of his time on making it look beautiful, rendered realistically.
Might I ask what, I guess, the transition between those two industries was like?
It for me was kind of a slow transition, so you barely noticed it since I always tried to make both kind of happen. It was not okay, on one day I decided I'm never doing graphic design again and now I'm a concept artist. Mm-hmm. It was more I studied graphic design, and already there I kind of knew what concept art is and always try to kind of incorporate as much concept art or illustration work as possible in focus of gaming design. And then I kind of found this job 4 years ago as an exhibition designer for museums. And this was kind of neat because it is still this graphic design I studied, but in museums sometimes you have like some interactive stuff happening, like movies, animations, or like even some computer games you can play in a museum to kind of portray an idea easier. And therefore, I could like do a little bit concept art, but not in the traditional manner of making like a big game production.
Yeah.
So like in that sense, for me, it was probably easier than someone else might have it. But like, yeah, there was a slow transition. It took me, I think, like 5 to 6 years at least to finally say, like this year, okay, let's go for it. I'm full-time gaming concept artist.
When it came to that transition, or just honestly looking at your art in general, where would you say you find the most valuable feedback for improvement? Do you have kind of a friend group that does similar things to you, or have you really cultivated an online network of people, other artists, maybe other people that work in museums that you can turn to for advice and mentorship?
I would say specifically for concept art, sadly, there was not so much like feedback or like people pushing me forward in the design industry, since they had a completely different focus, right? They were like focused on doing like layouts for magazines or stuff like that. But in general, like feedback came from everywhere, but the most valuable feedback and helpful feedback came actually like working in the industry. I know that sounds like kind of like, well, how should I get feedback when I don't can kind of get into the industry right now? But if you manage to kind of find a mentor in the industry or someone that already works in the industry, this is the most helpful feedback you can get. Because what I noticed, because I also try to get feedback from friends or like other like online communities, like on Discord or some other forums. But there was this problem always that most people are still also trying to get into the industry, and they can't know better. Some stuff they can't know how the industry works, like how's the production pipeline going. So what I noticed when I started trying to get feedback, I started to going to art conferences like Drawing House Was a Unicorn, or like IFCC in Croatia. There's also like playgrounds in the Netherlands. So this is like a good place to start dipping your toes into the industry and start getting to know people that work in there. What I noticed there when I started to try to get feedback on my portfolio, I had kind of prepared that I had a lot of polished work and I wanted to be like a concept artist. And like the recruiters I talked to or like other concept artists that already work in industry were like, okay, this is all cool, looks nice and polished, but we want to see like the design ideas behind that. And this is something I think there's a difference between getting feedback from friends. They can help you to make a picture look beautiful because sometimes you just don't see stuff when you work on it, right? But when you have like an art director that already works in the industry, he can kind of say to you, well, we need that here in the company. We need to see how you can solve a problem and come up with ideas.
No, that makes sense, especially with the friends that are also kind of in the same place that you might be in.
Yeah, definitely. So like if I could give a tip in that direction is, I know it's kind of hard and it doesn't work that easy as finding like an online community. But if there is a chance to, for example, get a mentorship with someone that works in the industry, I know that there are some artists that offer that on Patreon, for example. Try to get a spot there, even if it's like kind of expensive from time to time. But definitely try that, because this is the most valuable feedback you can get, because those people already know what companies need, right? So they can tell you this works and this doesn't.
Makes sense. So, for your own artistic journey, when did you really start focusing improvement wise on building up a strong portfolio for yourself? And what was your thought process when it came to making portfolio pieces that you deemed good enough? I know that that's a very general term, and I know that as artists we judge our own work the harshest, but
yeah, that's a tough one.
yeah.
I would say there were like two different stages on that road to like getting a final good portfolio that also got me my first gigs. I would say like the first one was probably around my time when I worked on my bachelor thesis for graphic design. This is like before that, I went to like those sad art conferences I talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And I got already like a feedback on my portfolio, and I think that portfolio is kind of representative for like a lot of other artists. It was like a lot of stuff, like there was this kind of illustration, there was like this cool samurai warrior that's like super stereotypic, but it's your first work, right? You kind of try to get into it. And with that feedback I got from them and talking to like recruiters from companies, I kind of got a glimpse, okay, I need that. And then I started like working on my portfolio and thought maybe I should, as a bachelor thesis, I should make a world building project, like writing my own story so I can kind of build up a pool of ideas I can always come back to instead of like each artwork needs its own story. So I had like this pool of like ideas. I could come up with like 10 characters because it's like all bound to this one story I started writing in the first hand. And this was during the bachelor thesis time, and this kind of worked out to give me my first smaller gigs because like recruiters saw, oh, look, this person can kind of like come up with like a main idea and kind of develop like 2 to 3 different characters for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, this is also stuff you have to do when you're like, again, the example of League of Legends, you have like a given set of story and you develop inside of that story like a lot of different characters. So this was the first thing. Like the other stage when I noticed, okay, there was still a lot of flaws in my design pipeline and work, was when I had my first art test at a AAA company. And this is kind of, again, like going back to valuable feedback from the last question, is I had this art director here. I failed that art test completely. Like, it was really like miserable after that. But like, I learned so much during that because he told me stuff about design and what I need to change if I want to get any gigs in the AAA field. And from there on, I started working on a new portfolio again with that given feedback. And this kind of gave me the checklist to say, okay, I checked all those to-do stuff that he gave me basically as art direction. And then I kind of knew, okay, this kind of fulfills some kind of quality standard I can be happy with so that I can at least apply to companies.
So there was a very large growth process from that, even if it was probably a bit frustrating at times.
Totally. And it took like a long time. It's not something you can just do overnight, especially if you have like job on the side and focusing also like on just living your life also.
Oh, yeah.
Which is also important.
The whole Rome was not built in a day type of philosophy.
Exactly, yeah. I can only recommend people take your time.
What did you have in your portfolio when you were contacted by your first freelance company?
I think like this first artist I talked about, like this was like 3 to 4 years ago. I had like some stuff from my bachelor thesis, which was basically 2 or 3 character designs. Like I had like a finished page where I had like a front design. Then I had some call outs from like design parts, like for example, how does the sword work of the character? How does like the cloak work? So then I basically had some rough idea, like how could this character, for example, work in a game with his skills or his weapons. So I had like 2 to 3 designs of that, and each design also had some variation and ideations, how I came up with the final design. And yeah, basically also this is something I got told beforehand, before I did my bachelor thesis. Like it doesn't need like 20 pieces in your portfolio to get hired. It's even better to have like less pieces. So maybe like, let's say 2 to 5 really well thought artworks. This goes for like illustration and concept art, because like the sad part, you always get judged on your worst piece in your portfolio. So like if you
definitely.
have if you have 4 good pieces, they're like, oh nice, and then like the last one is like really like super old and not the best one. They look at that, it's like, what happened there? So yeah, so this is also like from time to time kind of like get rid of all the work in your portfolio.
Oh, yeah. I feel like quality over quantity is something that I hear a lot from
Yes,
people.
definitely.
And about how old were you when you really kind of dove in and entered the industry?
So for when I started being a designer, with exhibition design, it was when I was like 23. So I'm 28 now and turned 29. And like actually like full-time concept art is I started 4 months ago, so like 28. So like I did like some part-time concept art gigs on the side while I was like exhibition designer. I would say that was like probably like 3 to 4 years ago. So like design 23 and concept art around 27, 28.
And how did you go about finding those freelancing companies and gigs, or was it mostly them contacting you through word of mouth?
I would say regarding the gigs I had in the past or like I'm working on right now, it was mainly me contacting them like really, really early. So like when I went to those art conferences, it kind of started noticing, okay, there's this type of company, there's this, and I just started writing lists with like companies I find interesting. And then I just went for it, even if I knew I wasn't good enough for it. I just went for it, like wrote mails like, hey guys, I'm looking for concept art gigs. Do you hire any freelancers, or do you have any stuff coming up in the future you might think I could fit into? And I mean, for sure, I wasn't good enough back then, and they said like, yeah, well, sorry, we don't have you, don't have work for you right now, or your skill is not good enough. But I just kept like writing them mails over and over again with like, like every 6 to 8 months or so. So then I updated my portfolio on the side also, so that they could see like I'm really interested in working with them and also work on that. So
Just show them that consistent improvement and drive.
yes, for sure. Like I noticed like kind of like it's better with applications if you can show clients, if you have already a list of clients, that you are improving really fast instead of like only applying once with the killer portfolio. They kind of are interested in to see like how well you can adapt to like an environment, or like how well you can learn new stuff. But like those companies in general, like you can, for example, check on ArtStation, there are listings. But the problem with that is, especially when you look for freelance, is that those are like all in-house positions most of the time. So that there is not a lot of like freelance gigs that get posted. It's really like you have to look for companies and apply there and just ask if they hire freelancers. It's especially difficult if you want to work for Riot Games or for Blizzard, for example. I mean, these are big companies, they mainly hire in-house, and if they hire freelancers, it's like only like rare occasions when they really want that one specific artist. So if there's one thing I could give as a tip, is probably if you really pursue like a career as a freelance artist, you should look for so-called outsourcing companies, because they are like big companies, but they mainly hire like freelancers, and they from time to time put you on several gigs, maybe also for Riot Games, for example. So like, for example, the gig I worked on last December for Noiro Studios. Noiro Studios is a classical outsourcing studio. They hire a lot of freelancers, and they have a roster of freelancers they just put on different gigs. So this is kind of like being employed at one company, but doing like a lot of stuff for other companies.
Ah, gotcha. And you found that to be a very good experience?
Yeah, I would say it's a good experience, especially if you want to get into the whole freelance thing. Like, because like in-house positions, I would say if you get in, your skill set can be a little bit lower than if you want to go full freelance for AAA. This is mainly because if like a company wants to hire you as a freelancer, they want to make sure that you are really made for the gig they want to work you on. They don't have wiggle room. Basically, if you would work in-house, they can get help from an art director or another artist to work on your stuff if you kind of start fucking up stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And this doesn't work for freelance, right? They put a lot of money into you to get the job done. So outsourcing studios, I would say there's a little bit more wiggle room in that regard, that you can start learning and get into the whole industry.
That makes sense. When you were first starting, kind of jumping back to when you went to those conferences and you started looking at companies, how many places were you kind of applying to?
Oh God, a lot, really a lot. Like if actually like before the interview, I checked my emails to like look how many applications I could send out. And
Yeah.
oh my God, I think like I stopped counting at 70. Like, and this is, I know from other people that this is even a low number. Like, I know people that apply to like 100 places. It's like, this can get a lot. And I would say like from those 70 places I applied to, maybe like 5 or so actually kind of went in a further direction that we talked about getting a job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I feel like that's something that ends up dissuading people from art because they think that, oh, so many people are going to say no or something like that.
Yeah, this is sadly something you need to get used to. This is, but I would say it's not a bad thing because it not always has to do with like them not wanting you. Sometimes they are such big companies, right? And sometimes your emails land in a spam folder or they just forget about it, which is sad, but it can happen. Like, for example, worst case scenario, when you live in Europe and apply at an American company, I had to learn it the hard way. Now it makes sense, but if you apply at an American company and write a mail, I don't know, like in the morning, they are all asleep. Like it's night for them. And if you write them like, and I don't know, when I write a mail at 9 a.m. to California, they never will see that mail because it just gets covered in all the other mails they get.
And that makes sense, but I feel like it's something that, I mean, until you said just now, I wouldn't have thought of.
Yeah, I mean, this is just like stuff you learn, and I think I have a different perspective on it too because when I worked as a designer, I was also in the position of hiring people from time to time, and oh man, I did get like I don't know, maybe to 40 mails a day on really bad days, and sometimes you just forget to answer people. This is I really hate that this happens, but it can happen, or you just don't have the time.
There's only 24 hours in a day, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I mean, if I would have the time to only answer mails, oh my god. Yeah, there's a lot of other stuff that has to be done too, so this kind of drowns in on the whole workday.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So when those over 70 emails did get answered, what was the interview process like? Or for those gigs, was there an interview process? I've heard from some folks that for freelancing gigs, they kind of just gave you a number and said, well, you can say yes or no.
This is a big roller coaster of feelings. I've seen so many different ways of companies or clients hiring you. It is so weird. Like, I think it also depends on how big a company is, on well established it is. So I've seen like, let me think, like my most recent gig I have is like, basically there was like 30 mails back and forth, just like writing, like signing NDAs and getting some details nailed down, like stuff for contracts. And I think like this took like a whole month at least, just writing mails. And after that, I had like an introduction call where we just started talking with each other. So basically, they are checking if you are made for the gig, not skill-wise as an artist, but more like if you're socially compatible with the team, if you kind of fit into the team. Because like social skills is also like a big part, especially if you work in a team.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, yeah, if you're a douchebag, it's kind of hard to work with, right? So, so this is like the first introduction call. After that, there was like some period where I didn't hear from them. There was like another NDA I had to sign. And after that, they kind of came back to me, were like asking if I want to do an art test or like some kind of other stuff, or if I want to start working on it right away. And then there was like another call where we talked about the project details, where I kind of like got some ideas about what they want to do and what they want from me. And after that, usually there is an art test, especially if you're like getting, like if you have your first gig in the industry or like your really first ones. I think this will kind of start go way longer you're in the industry and your bigger your collection of clients is you have in your portfolio, right?
Yeah.
But I also had like companies that were like the same size as the example I gave now, and they just went straight away like, okay, what do you want? How much money do you want us to pay you? And say yes and no, and then let's go. And I was sitting there like, okay, cool. And like there's not even like a call there. Just like, here's the details, let's start working. It's okay. So it can be a little bit of everything.
It's very interesting to see that dichotomy.
Yeah, like this is like only like showing on the side of like companies, right? Like private clients are a whole different story. This like especially commissions or stuff like that. It can be either like the best gig ever or like the worst experience you can have in your life.
Oh no.
Like there's a funny page called Clients from Hell, and this is like really funny stuff that can happen to you too if you're
Oh.
unlucky.
Oof.
Yeah.
How long have you been working with, or I guess what was the average that you'd say that you've worked with each of your freelancing companies?
So yeah, with that example, I would say like minimum was like a month, but this can go up to 6 month contracts. So usually, what I experience, I mean, this can be probably different for other people, and maybe also different to the movie industry. But with gaming, usually you have like contracts from 1 month to 6 months. 6 months is more rare, but I would
Mm.
say right now I'm working towards like maybe a 6 month contract, but mostly it was like a month. And this is like really, it sounds like a lot, but it's like a really short amount of time for doing a lot of work.
Did you have any expectations when you went into your first gig? Or were you just kind of going in blind?
Mm, I don't know. Like on one hand, like I went into the gig like thinking, now I finally made it. Now like my career is kicking off. Now let's go. Let's get like a lot of gigs, and I will be the best concept artist ever. No, joking. But I kind of thought like, oh nice, now I'm in there, and it will just continue like that, and I will be made for the gig. Like, why would they hire me if I wouldn't be able to do it? And like, oh god, I was so wrong.
Yeah?
But yeah, that I already knew a lot from all the conferences I went to, so I felt like I'm well prepared. But like, there's so much like small details to like, especially for concept art, to finally delivering the final concept art work, like the final character design, for example. And there's so much small details into it, and I was really overwhelmed with it. So this is also probably why I kind of like did not manage my first artist with my first gig, especially with AAA. Like with like smaller commissions, it's something different. But yeah, you learn a lot from your mistakes. I mean, there's some truth into that saying, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's also important to kind of make those mistakes and kind of fail. Also, it would be weird if you're always succeeding. You will probably never get to your best form if you're always like winning. So like having those mistakes or like really fall from time to time is helpful. And this is going back to the question before, like this is where I learned the most, like the most valuable feedback was like failing my first real big art test. Because since then I kind of knew what I have to look out for.
I would I would honestly love to hear what you would say were some of your biggest mistakes and some advice that you'd give to other artists for like what are mistakes to look out for.
Perfection. Perfection, especially with concept art in the early stages, is the killer. You waste so much time on maybe just sitting there like thinking, oh, that line needs to be perfect. I'm drawing right now, especially if you're like more like line art artist like I am, not like photo bashing or so. But I guess that applies also to photo bashing. Like especially in the early stages with concept art, no one cares if it's like perfect. That is something that can be done later on the polishing stage. But like you lose so much time just like thinking about all those nitpicky stuff because it's your personal preference to make lines perfect. I still have that problem nowadays, and I'm trying to kind of work around it. So like, you don't always need to be perfect. The art director will kind of tell you if you need to work on it on the rendering or whatever. But don't be too perfect in the beginning. Also, like, don't be afraid to ask questions. Like an art director, if you work with an art direction, is there to help you. And if an art director, for example, says like, I won't help you, there's something wrong with that relationship, or he's not a good art director, I would say. But in
Mm-hmm.
general, if you're like really struggling with something, don't be afraid to ask, because how should you know if you don't, for example, don't understand the briefing? Like for sure, don't like write, I don't understand it at all. Like maybe pick out some specific stuff you're stuck with, but always ask questions if you need to.
Hopping back to, I guess, quote unquote, the norm for you now, what does your average day as a freelancer kind of look like? Do you get to set your own schedule, or does that really depend on who you happen to be working for at the moment?
Yeah, it depends on the client, I would say. Like I try, no matter what client I have, I try to still give my client some kind of like borders. I say to them, sorry, I won't work 14 hours a day. I mean, this can happen, but this should be the norm, right? But I usually try to have work days between 6 to 10 hours maximum. And this shouldn't be like, you shouldn't have like 10 hours days like ongoing. This is not healthy and you will burn out and then you can never work again. This doesn't make sense. So usually I would say for me, because I kind of schedule that with my recent clients, is I tell them, okay, there's like 2 to 3 days. I will be available for them to call me or like write me mails. But I won't send stuff over to them if they don't specifically ask for that in the contract. So I say like I work like 2 to 3 days and then I deliver something and then I have like a feedback call with them where it's just like we're talking back and forth what should be changed. And during those 3 days, I usually try to keep my 6 to 10 hours a day maximum. So like trying to kind of get like the average working day like someone else would have if they're like working in-house somewhere. I try to do that with freelance life too.
Kind of keep that healthy balance.
Yes, exactly. And then sometimes it can happen. This is then the good thing with freelance life is that if you have that feedback call with them, it can happen that they don't come back to you right away with like stuff you can keep working on. So then you have maybe like a free day or like don't have to work on anything, so you can do just personal stuff. Or like do all the other stuff that's kind of like necessary as a freelancer, like writing mails and having other calls with other people.
Get a bit of a break.
Yeah.
So with that, do you keep to kind of a Monday through Friday schedule? Or do you allow yourself to work weekends? Or do you kind of set that boundary with your clients?
I try to set that boundary because for me, my weekends are kind of important to catch up on family or friends. But I mean, sometimes it doesn't work. And really depending on the gig, for example, like I would say something like a 5-day work week doesn't work with movie productions, I would say, because I don't have experience that. I only heard stories from friends that worked on movies. It can happen that you have like really crunch work where you work 1 month straight, all days of the week. Yeah, but yeah, I try to keep my weekends free.
Makes sense. One of the major difficulties aspiring concept artists face that I've noticed is not knowing what their value is. And I see this a lot with both freelance and in-house. Would you be comfortable at all discussing your pay at all and how you kind of came to deciding how much you would charge for commissions and freelance when you're in a position to decide how much you're going to get paid?
Sure, I can talk about like a general idea because I can't go into details with like specific companies.
Oh, totally.
But I can give like maybe a general overview how to get your daily rate, I would say, because I'm still working with daily rates. I know people work with hourly rates or like even fixed prices. There are some differences in that, but this is something I would say for later on. So like for that example, I would say we start with daily rates. But so in general, I would say to find out what your values or your daily rate is that you need to find out what your personal expenses are. So as a freelancer, for example, you have to pay for rent, food, equipment, healthcare, taxes, insurance, like all the stuff. And on the other side, you also want to save some money, right? You don't want to end up like always coming out with a zero at the end of the month. So, so for an example, my first calculation I ever did was basically I found out I need at least 1,000 euro after taxes. And with that, I kind of reached month's end with like a zero on my bank account. But this for sure is not sustainable, right, for a long period, because maybe you want to buy a car or like get a better apartment or just have fun or live your life, go on vacation. So with that in mind, with those 1,000 euro after taxes, now we assume that you can write an invoice for around one artwork per week. This means to make like 1,000 euro per month, you kind of need to charge at least 250 euro per artwork, like per invoice per week. And counting all these hours in you spend on such artworks, you kind of quickly notice that this is not sustainable on the long run. So let's assume you need like 3 work days at 8 hours a day. That gives you kind of like an hourly rate of 10 euro. Just as a comparison, that's like roughly minimal above like the minimum wage in Germany. So there you kind of start noticing, okay, is that sustainable on the long run? If you keep getting stuck on like charging 250 euro per artwork, which sounds in the first run like a lot of money, right? You kind of notice, okay, there's something wrong. And with that 10 euro hourly rate, you still have to pay taxes. So I would say the minimum you really have to charge, if you like, for example, have commission-based work where you said fixed price is like 250 euro, is that you really start with that amount of money. At least if you live in Germany, like every country is different, right? So that in mind, like I would say like 250 euro per artwork, but this can also, I would say, translate to like a daily rate. Because the thing is, so I think like my first gig, I charged like 220 euro a day because I knew that this will be like a 1 month contract. And this is like a lot of money then in the end, if you kind of count the days up, right? But it was not like that I had like, how can I say that? Like, it's not like that I always only drew this whole month. I also had like a lot of meetings and stuff, and then there was like times where I just didn't get any work with them, and then I couldn't charge them like a daily rate. So like it was like I just wrote down the days I worked for them, and then you kind of quickly start noticing, okay, well, I need to charge more at some point. So like I would say, like as a general idea, at least in Germany or Europe, maybe also in the US, start with like around 200 to 250 daily rate, but also like keep negotiations up with clients. It makes no sense that you just say, this is my number and I will never talk to you again if you don't pay it, right? Kind of also need gigs, but I would never, I know that some people will start throwing rocks at me for that when I say that now, but if a company asks you to make like fully rendered out illustrations or character designs for like 50 euro, I heard like a lot of companies, like smaller gigs, did that. Even if it hurts, don't do it. You kind of like hurt yourself on the long run because you get a lot of work from them, but for low pay. But then you have no time to make like quality work for yourself because you're just working all the time to survive kind of the month. And you also hurt like the whole industry because like other artists also try to rise their prices to survive kind of. And if I, for example, in the beginning, it was hard for me, and I mean like kind of was in a privileged situation because I also had my design gig. But this is something I would say for people, if you can do it, before you jump into the industry only doing like 50 euro character designs, which there's a lot out there, maybe get a job on the side, like if you can do design stuff in-house, do that, or if you can maybe, I don't know, work at an art store, something that like is kind of close to what you want to do anyways, is helpful. But if you can get any job on the side that allows you to work on the side as a concept artist too, do that before like jumping into the industry because you want it so bad. This will just hurt you in the long run. I had friends that really struggled with that to kind of transition into really good gigs because it just burned them out so much because they always try to survive the month.
Yeah.
So you don't want to do that.
Yeah. And again, that's something that it's a struggle for a lot of people, I feel like, both in the arts industry and outside.
Definitely, and I know that I kind of talk from a privileged standpoint there with my design job I had. And I know that for everyone, the situations are different, and sometimes you just don't have the choice. I know that happens. But if you can avoid it, don't do it. You kind of help the whole industry with that also if you just say no to such clients. Because sadly, also, those clients I heard from are also not the nicest ones. They always want, and they never like listen to you. They just need the job to be done for like a low amount of money. This is like you always lose on that side. And this is also how I did it, and I'm happy it worked out. I mean, I know that for some other people, they went that road and it worked for them too. But they were like really burned out for some time after that. So
yeah,
if you can do it, or like at least see a chance to go like the slow route, because you don't need to be a full-fledged out full-time concept artist with 18. You don't need to. Then go the slow route. Take your time, build a nice portfolio, really try to aim for the bigger companies that kind of understand that you are a person that needs to survive also. And then go for it and take your time. No one cares if you're like 30 as a freelancer or 40. No one cares. Like with in-house positions, maybe that's different. But if you want to be a freelancer, holy crap, start with like 30 if you want to. Like Jama Jualabarov, like this one famous concept artist, I think he started also like super late. I think he started with like mid and 30s, I think. Something around that. Maybe I'm super wrong right now, but I think he was that it started really late being a concept artist. So it works.
Yeah, that is something that I have noticed with concept artists, is that age is but a number, and that does not matter as much.
Definitely. I mean, as an artist, especially as a freelancer, you will basically work your whole life, so you can also like enjoy your young life when you're still able to go do some cool sports or travel. It doesn't make sense that you like throw away all your youth just to be like the kick-ass concept artist and have a burnout with like 30. Like you will only be like young once, right? So enjoy that life if you can.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. We have a little bit of extra time. Cool. Are you down to move into the extra questions?
Sure. Let's go.
All right. What makes you most excited about concept art?
Oh,
a very open-ended question, I know.
Yeah, I would say like from the top of my head, like the first thing that comes up, like seeing something that you made or worked on for months, even up to years, kind of appear on a screen or in a game and people enjoying that. This is like really nice. Like just imagine like working on skins for characters in games and then seeing them popping up, someone playing it, and like maybe on a stream, a streamer says like, look at that skin, it's super cool. I mean, that's fulfilling. That's nice.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I did that.
Yeah, it's like this, all those years working on it and all that struggle, and then it's like this small pat on the shoulder. Yeah, you did it. Nice job. But like, besides that, like I would say like getting the chance on like working on cool ideas that you would never have thought of yourself maybe, and just like trying to make it work and have something that works out as a concept in the end. It's like always nice.
Mm-hmm. I've seen on your Instagram and on your ArtStation some animation pieces, and I think that kind of can lead into the next question. How do you see 3D being utilized in concept art?
Oh, it's necessary. Even if you're like someone that loves to just paint, like a traditional painter, I mean, that you can still get jobs if you're just a traditional painter, right? But I think nowadays it's super important to have at least a basic understanding of some 3D programs. Like, it just helps you so much, like getting some quick compositions built, for example. Like, sure, I know people that can do that by hand, but even if they're super fast, it takes them a little bit longer. Like, if the client comes, can we shift the camera by 20 degrees? If you only do that, you kind of sit there like, well, damn, now I have to draw it completely new, while in the 3D program, it's like one click, right? I mean, you don't need to be like a perfect, like photorealistic 3D artist. No way. But having a basic understanding how some stuff works is super important. And I would say it will be more in the future, even like with all this VR stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I think it will be super important for sure in the future.
Are there any 3D programs that you would personally recommend for artists?
Oh, sure. Blender. It's for free, and it's like kind of like getting be a part of the industry now. Like, I know a lot of concept artists that worked on The Last of Us 2, for example. They did some of their concept work and even in-game stuff with Blender. Like, at least like the concepts. And I mean, it's for free and it's like a super powerful tool. And like some bigger companies also start trusting that program and putting effort in. And if you see like the choice you have between Blender, which is for free, or you buy Maya, which costs like €3,000 a year, you kind of choose Blender, I would say.
Yeah, the choice is pretty clear in my opinion.
Yeah. Or what else is there? Like if you are into like, for example, prop design, like weapons or something, There are also some free alternatives popping up a lot more, and also like CAD programs. This is something that comes from the engineering industry. This is basically like 3D program with the focus on like making something work in real life, for example. So you can really start with a 2D side sketch and then start extruding the stuff and like put in values and numbers like centimeter and stuff and really make it work as it would be like a real thing. So this is like for prop designers, there would be for the iPad is a really cool program. It's called Shaper 3D. This is something that's developed by Siemens. They focus on engineering a lot, and there's a free version for it that basically allows to have like 2 projects open. Like you can't really export stuff there with the free version, but just getting into like CAD program that's like high quality, I would recommend that too. And you can from there, I think you can get like a cheap version with a monthly subscription. Then you can start exporting it to like other 3D programs like Blender.
Nice. Would you consider yourself someone that has a style, whether it be in your personal work or client work? Do you think people hire you for that style?
Nowadays and recently, I would say yes, because I actually did get mails for like the last few months where people specifically said we love the style of that project and we need it for our project. But like I know that it is a struggle for a lot of people, especially if you begin. But I would, yeah, I have a certain style, but you should be open to kind of adapt a little bit to other stuff. So this is why I also have in my portfolio, for example, some photo bashing in it, even if I know I won't get hired for that or I don't want to get hired for that because I'm not good at it right now. But it's good to have a style that you can deliver consistently, but it's nothing I would say you need to focus on. This is something that will just come with time. And some people, there will be the point where people say you have a nice style and you sit there like, wait a minute, I didn't focus on getting a style. Yeah, it's just like having a style. It's just like the final thing that happens from all the influences you have around you, like either be friends or like books you're reading, movies you're watching. It's kind of like at some point it starts crashing together, and then you have that thing called style everyone is looking for. But in general, I would say, of course, it makes sense to kind of keep an eye on that anyway, a little bit. So good example is, for example, if you want to work for Blizzard, it kind of makes sense to put your stuff in that direction, right? I mean, if you're like only doing photo bashing and want to work for Blizzard, it kind of gets awkward in the application process.
Are there any non-concept art related experiences that find their way into your process? Like what are some things that you find inspiring you, whether that be things that you do outside of work?
Used to be like, I mean, it's also still kind of doing art, right? Like I did a lot of graffiti when I was younger, and I mean, it's art, so I would say you can't say that this is kind of like influencing it that much. But I go for a lot of skateboarding and climbing, bouldering, and this kind of like with skateboarding, for example, you try one trick over and over again. This is kind of like similar to doing concept art, right? You're kind of like trying to push that final design through at some point. So like with skateboarding, this influences me that never give up and keep pushing. At some point it will work out if you try to learn from your mistakes, kind of, because like if you try the trick all like a skateboarding trick, for example, if you try it all the time and do the same thing, it doesn't work. But if you try to learn from the mistakes you made, you kind of get there at some point that it works. The same goes for concept art.
Definitely. And I feel like that's also just a very healthy way of looking at it. Gotta keep getting up.
Yeah, never give up.
So is that one of the main ways you spend your time outside of work?
Yeah, right now I would say like mainly right now I'm going for bouldering, climbing, and meeting up with friends, like of course like depending on the situation with COVID right now. But going to the cinema, I love watching a lot of movies, so do like a lot of movie nights, getting inspiration there, and sometimes going outside for a walk. But I'm not like that kind that goes for a lot of walks, but this can be also refreshing and inspiring too.
Definitely. kind of the most loaded question of them all. Do you have a goal in mind for your future? Is there something that's driving you forward with your art?
I mean, like, I'm a person that doesn't try to look too far in the future. That kind of gives me anxiety.
Oh no!
But yeah, no, but because, like, you know, that thing where you start spiraling, like, oh no, then I'm 40, then I'm 50, and so on and so on.
Yep, definitely.
I'm kind of that kind of person, but like for short term, like I would say, having still time besides doing like awesome client work to also do my own work, because I love building worlds. Like all my stuff in my portfolio is all my own work. There's not a lot of client work I put up there. So I love just writing stories and maybe also do like a lot of collaborations with other artists from like music industry or like screenwriters or something. Just like trying out new stuff and still have the time to learn new things and not like kind of standing on the same point for a long time. Just trying to move forward and do new stuff. This is my dream. If I find time for that and be healthy, not overworking myself, this would be the dream.
Yes. Definitely making sure to not overwork yourself is avoid that burnout.
Yeah, if that is something we can kind of like have as a statement of that, like interviews, like don't overwork yourself. It's not necessary. You have your whole life to work as a concept artist, so use it.
Well, thank you so much for coming in and sharing all of this with us today. This has been super awesome.
Thank you for having me on the podcast. It was like an honor.
Aw. Well, while I still have you, do you have any platforms or projects that you're working on that you'd like to give a little shout out to?
It's mainly my art station. This is where like I upload all my stuff. And for like if someone looks for feedback or something, check out Patreon. There's a lot of cool people that can give you mentorships.
Awesome. And we will be linking to your art station as well.
Thank you.
And if anyone is listening to this and wants to work with you or wants to ask for a commission,
I'm always open up for like a lot of work. So if people like want to work with me, they can always just approach me. And usually that's over ArtStation. There's also my email address. So if you have an idea or a project, you can just write me a mail and we figure out if we can make it work with my schedule or not, or like find some way to make it work.
Wonderful.
Always interested in knowing what people are up to.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for listening. If you are a concept artist or know one who might be interested in coming on the show, please let me know. And thank you again, Dom, for joining us today.
Thank you. I was kind of nervous in the beginning, but happy how the whole podcast worked.
I hope that it got less nerve-wracking as it went on.
Yeah, it was better in the end, because like in the beginning I was like, oh god. don't fuck it up, but it worked out. And don't say too many curse words, because I know that happens with me from time to time.
No, I only heard you curse once, so you're good. Okay. Don't even worry about it.
Like heavy sweating starting, like, oh no, don't say it.
Oh no.
No, it was awesome. Thank you for having me again.
Thank you for coming on. I hope you have a great rest of your evening, I believe you said?
Yeah, it's like 5 p.m. now for me.
Gotcha.
Yeah, a little bit of client work, some mails, and then I guess I will go for some climbing.
Awesome. Well, I hope you have a ton of fun.
I hope you too will have like a nice evening.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your night.
You too. Bye.
Bye.